then I had to go even back in time and say, who were, in my opinion, the main intellectual prophets of this revolutionary passion in Latin America, the passion for revolution. And I found four prophets, all by the name of Jose, the four Josephs of the Latin American revolutionary gospel. One was Jose Marti. I think he's probably the most lovable, likable, and endearing Latin American that has ever lived. And the book starts by saying the history of modern political ideas in Latin America start with a New Yorker named Jose Marti, because he was a New Yorker. He was born in Cuba. He's, of course, the great hero of Cuban independence, although he did not live to see that independence. And Jose Marti fought against the Spanish dominion of Cuba. As you know, Cuba, everyone knows, Cuba was the last bastion of the Spanish until the Spanish-American War. He ended up being the main leader of that revolution. He went to Cuba, and he was killed at the very beginning of the war, 3 years before the Spanish-American War. But he foresaw three things. One, he didn't want Spain to remain a colony of Cuba remain a colony of Spain. That's for sure. But second, he didn't want Cuba to become a colony of the United States. And then third, he didn't want Cuba to be dominated, and he said that, and it's there in a letter, by one caudillo, one man who would feel as a redeemer of its country and to rule over a kind of benign tyrant. No? He was making a clear picture of Fidel Castro. So this very moving, very figure that I love very much, as you can see, is the first prophet of the book. Then comes a man very much less known, because Marti, you can read him even there is a Penguin book, a companion of Marti's chronicles and poems in English, beautifully translated. But the second one is, his name is Jose Enrique Rogo, an Uruguayan teacher, professor, philosopher. And he wrote a little book, tiny book, called Ariel, based on Shakespeare's Tempest. But what he said there in that tiny book, it was written and published in the year 1901 or 19. I mean, 2 years after the Spanish-American War. And what he said there is that in America we have two civilizations, two cultures. Anglo-Saxon American culture and Latin American Hispanic heritage and culture. And that they were opposing. This is a caricature. It's a much more subtler book, as you will find, very nuanced, very well written. But what it said in essence was, we cannot be reconciled. And I think that little book was like the gospel of Ibero-American nationalism. The third one is Jos Vasconcelos, who was probably the most famous Latin American thinker and philosopher, a Mexican Secretary of Education in the first half of the 20th century. No one remembers him now, but he was very important, Jos Vasconcelos. And he was like a redeemer in the sense that he brought education, books, and culture spread them all through Mexico. It was like a cultural renaissance. If you've been in Mexico and you've seen the murals of Diego Rivera and Orozco and Siqueiros, the man who invented Mexican muralism is Jos Vasconcelos. Those murals were meant to be the pictorial gospel for the people to see themselves. This is the story of Mexico and the working classes and the peasants and the new reign of social justice that we are building. And the fourth redeemer is a Peruvian writer and editor who was José Carlos Mariátegui, immensely influential in Latin America. He died in 1931. And he managed to write a prophecy on the blending of indigenism. He came from a very from a country like Peru or Bolivia and Ecuador, where indigenous population is much more present than in Mexico, by far.